All right, well, we're right on schedule now. We're going to go ahead and get going here with our discussion of AI chatbots and language models in the workforce. So kind of following on nicely to some of the other topics we've discussed. And our panelists for this panel, again, we'll start with Sean Riley, go just down the road. If he looks familiar, he was just up here. So I would say no further introduction is necessary. But Sean is the CEO of American Operations at BitZero. And then to my left, your right, is Todd Pringle. Todd is the Advanced Engineering Manager at John Deere Intelligent Solutions Group. And then finally, at the end, again, further on your right, on my left, our last panelist is Francis Martison from Microsoft. So again, thank you everybody for participating in this panel. Thank you everybody that's here and watching online for connecting in. And so, it's kind of interesting. We ended up the last panel with really what is a great question to almost start this panel. I'll give you the microphone so you can answer it too. That will probably help a little bit, at least for those listening remotely. But we talked a little bit about this displacing workforce, right? So the question that Chancellor Hagerath ended us off with is, when we were talking about design, this was displacing people that were doing knowledge work. Our earlier panelist from Microsoft talked about how it was displacing people that were doing meeting summaries, again, knowledge work. What is, kind of going down the row, and I think we'll come back. I know everybody has something that they wanted to potentially say right off the bat as well, but let's start with this and kind of phase in from the other panel. What is your take on that? And then once we go just kind of down the road with that, we'll come back and then we'll talk a little bit about, where do we start, if that makes sense.
All right. I would like to say that it's true. ChatGPT AI is replacing people, but not replacing the human workforce. The skilled people are never going to leave. And that's something that we should all understand, that as a matter of fact, you can't do normal, mundane, knowledgeable things and expect to stay in the workforce. You should try to upskill. So from all that we've learned, if you are not skilling up to a particular thing, something that goes with creativity, emotional intelligence, and anything that has to do with creativity, emotional intelligence, and something that has to do with a personal point of view or interaction with your workforce, then you're going to lose your job. These are some of the things that ChatGPT AI would never ever take over. The kind of emotional needs. So if you're working with, from a customer service point of view, it's not about how fast you resolve cases. It's about how much you do that with calmness, how you resolve the case, and making sure that the resolution journey is a little bit much more in touch with the person. All of those things come up, and then you realize that at the end of the day, it's not about you, it's about how much you are there to compete with AI. And so yes, it's true, AI is going to replace so many things. It's actually replacing so many things, but then again, it is our responsibility to upskill, to specialize, and then to actually challenge ourselves to grow deeper into our knowledge base, and then try to pick up some few things that make us much more non-robotic and much more non-normalized in our workforce. I don't know if that makes sense with that though.
So I don't match the agenda. I'm a stand-in, but I have a lot of opinions on this topic. And if I go into a fugue state, throw a rock at me. So I'll try to be brief as I can, but this is arguably one of the two most impactful aspects of AI. When we talk about displacement, I don't think we know. Just a couple of years ago, if you were to list from expert analysts, what are the jobs most likely to be replaced by AI? Artists was on the last. I mean, in fact, there are many people saying that might be the only job left, is an artist. And that is actually the first job that has created like real existential employment, panic, because, here it is, entry-level graphic artists. But that said, even with that potential threat, and that's really an uncertainty, The need for expression. I mean, art is addressing human needs. We won't get into that, but the bringing down the cost, sort of the commodification of that expression, might actually increase the demand quite a bit. And what now is an entry-level graphic artist might be tomorrow somebody that's actually the most adept at using these tools to really tailor what is hopefully a broader market. So it's not known whether this is going to impact those jobs on a numerical basis. It will absolutely impact the nature of that work. But what I want to stress is we just don't know what that displacement is going to be. Legal, certainly, when you look at, we now have something that can produce English. Good news for people starting careers in law. It still hallucinates. I would prefer the term confabulator, but hallucinate is what's stuck. The good news is we have real demographic issues. We have real workforce issues. And this is a good time to have something come in that's really potentially a step change in automation. The challenge is it could happen much faster than we're typically used to these things being introduced. So from a displacement standpoint, it's highly variable, but it's likely to be large. There's some good news in that we've sort of been through this before, which is over the course of globalization, we saw a lot of change and a lot of need for like retraining and that sort of thing. But that happened over 20 years and we did a horrible job at it. But we can learn and we understand the importance of this stuff and maybe not do a horrible job at it. But we don't have 20 years for this to roll out. This is mostly a currently the current stuff that people are working on to integrate is not as hardware constrained as the productivity revolution that computing has been driving us on for the past 20 years. That's been the pacing item. All the things that came from the smartphone. There's a pile of stuff that all had to be worked out, and so the productivity benefits of the smartphone, and before that, the productivity benefits of things like Microsoft Office, and before that, just not having to type anymore. They happened at a scale that we were able to reasonably manage that displacement. The challenge here is just going to be the speed. So bad news, it's going to go fast. We don't know where it's going to impact. Good news is we actually really could use a major step change in productivity. Not just for workforce, but the last thing is inflation. We're printing money like it's gone out of style. We've gotten away with printing money, partially because we've had a multi-decade run of productivity gains that has absorbed those the otherwise inflationary forces. We also have a globe that can absorb our dollars. So the anti-inflationary, the deflationary impacts of productivity are great because we desperately need them now. The bad news is the effect is going to be seen very asymmetrically, and that's going to create a lot of pain points. And I'll stop.
So let's talk about the art aspect right away. Are there more artists today or fewer artists today than there were 10 years ago? Anybody? More, a lot more. Are there more artists who are making money at art today or 10 years ago? It's more today, a lot more, right? NFTs. Anybody in here own an NFT? Right? I'm not a big collector of NFTs, but I love the concept. I love the technology, right? But there are people who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, taking their artwork and applying that in an NFT onto an engine in which they now have an avenue to sell their artwork easily. Many of those NFTs can now be artificially generated or generated through an AI. None of that is super easy, right? It is still a skill set. It is still a knowledge set. It still takes an artist to understand what they're developing, what they're growing, what they're building. We're not actually depleting this industry. We're actually accelerating. Again, we're commoditizing this industry. When you look back through history, people like to say this is the first time this has ever happened. This never happened before, right? So a John Deere will really appreciate this aspect, right? But from going from horses to tractors, right? Let's take the bulldozer example. How many people were displaced by bulldozers in the 1900s? Tons, hundreds of thousands, right? So where's all the millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people unemployed standing around because they were displaced, because they couldn't use a shovel anymore? Well, they learn new skills, right? And this is, again, we've done this over and over and over again. I'll ask this one. No one will know this one, but I'll ask, there's some professors in the room, maybe somebody. What was the number one most popular job in the year 1917 that no longer exists on the entire planet? Pregnant horse urine collector. Think what I just said there. Pregnant horse urine collector. Why? Because they actually collected the horse urine of pregnant horses because it gave them a chemical ability to be able to create medications at the time that later was completely replaced by epinephrine. Right? The technology evolved. The job is gone. It was a huge job all across the country. People went around doing this everywhere, going to horses that were pregnant and collecting their urine so that they could make medicine. And that job no longer exists. Have you ever heard anyone complain that job no longer exists? Nobody wanted to do that job to begin with. It was a horrible job. We upskilled people, right? And over the first half of the 20th century, we saw this over and over again from an industrial revolution. Now we're going to see this in a different way. And we'll keep talking that through, but it's enabling new roles and enabling new thought and taking away work that was mundane work and enabling people to be able to do that mundane stuff much, much faster and then create new value going forward. And that's where I think that's happening in art today across the board, and is happening in many, many other fields.
Well, excellent. Well, again, that's kind of starting maybe on the negative note. But I mean, that's good, right? It's a concern. So it's good to think about all of these things. It's good to think about the positives of technology. It's good to think about the negatives of technology as well. But I want to throw it open now to you guys to, whatever, you wanted to start off by saying, let's just go down the row and again, whatever it is you want to say, and then we'll come back and we'll get to some more questions and hopefully some questions from the audience and those online as well.
So if today's newspapers existed in the year 1900, they would all say the same thing. It would be this giant, oh my goodness, clickbait title. 96% of jobs will disappear over the next 50 years. That would be the title in the year 1900. And they would have been right. Because over that 50-year term, we added a massive industrial revolution across the entire planet, right? How many people had electricity in the year 1900 versus how many had electricity in 1950? How many had indoor plumbing in 1900 versus 1950, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? We helped people to change their jobs. And when I use the bulldozer thing, right? A bulldozer was replacing 100 people with shovels. But those people got new skills. We changed the education system because of that new capability, right? How many people were graduating high school in the year 1900 versus how many were graduating high school in 1950? Look at colleges, the accessibility of the university system in 1900 versus 1950. We had changed our society to meet that new technological advancement. We can't do that again? I think we can. I think we absolutely can. And we're doing it now. We're going to change how we think. We're going to change how we learn. And we're going to change our education. We'll change our jobs. And we'll do less and less boring, commodity, repeating, predictable work. And we'll do more and more higher value work. And that's what I think from a workforce standpoint really encompasses artificial intelligence today and what's coming in the future.
So based on your comment, see, I thought he's been very positive. So if you said that it's getting kind of negative, it must be all me on bringing everybody down. So maybe
I was just talking about the topic, not necessarily the responses to the topic.
Well, I'm trying to decide whether to bring people further down or not. So I'm long-term very bullish about this. This is incredibly exciting. The asymmetries part, though, that's what needs to be a wake-up call for an unknown fraction of us. Is how are those asymmetries going to play out? Now, there are tremendous trillion-dollar opportunities in those asymmetries that we don't know yet. There are new Amazons, there are new Facebooks, there are new Twitters, there are new Teslas that right now are probably being incubated somewhere, or are being argued about in a dorm somewhere. So there are tremendous upside opportunities to this. There's going to be so many new jobs that, this prompt engineer thing. I don't know. I mean, you're talking about an English, a natural language interface. We're probably going to call it something else. But the notion that how you do software development is radically going to change, at least at the front end, at least at direct user functional stuff. The back end is going to be more complicated. But there are two areas where I see at least the present manifestation of what we're now calling AI. And I think it's important to note something, to note another inflection point, that in all my life, and I'm older than I look, AI has always been a future thing. AI encompassed a bunch of things, and we'd figure something out, and we would no longer consider that part of AI. Optical character recognition, speech recognition, ability to recognize a cat, all sorts of stuff used to be part of AI. Once we figured them out, oh yeah, that's just tech. And AI was always this future thing. It's only been recently that the zeitgeist has changed, and now we're dealing with AI affecting our lives right now. So we've accepted that conceptualization that something in the future, because it wasn't that impactful yet, but now we're seeing something that potentially very impactful. It's changed how we think about it. So now AI is actually happening right now. So that's a huge deal. The two biggest opportunities that I'm also the most concerned about, because I fear headwinds to implementation on these. The two biggest opportunities for benefit of society to AI is in education and in healthcare. But both of those systems, if you look at inflation and the things that have gone down, the things less regulated, the things that aren't built with gated, that aren't gated institutions, that aren't guilds, that don't involve highly regulated markets and regulatory capture, the areas that aren't in those spaces have actually been deflationary. Things have gotten less and less expensive in a lot of ways. When you look at aggregate inflation and what's driving it, healthcare costs, education costs are the biggest. Housing is a big one too. We're starting to see more fundamental inflation, but healthcare and education are at a crisis level. AI could actually address a lot of those inflationary drivers if we are willing to do it, if we're willing to fight for it. But this is fighting against the way things are done. This is fighting against existing regulatory frameworks and guild mentalities. And frankly, and I am an adjunct prof at NDSU. I'm technically an employee at NDSU, and I want to be. And I've given my heart and soul and my pocketbook to this institute. And I want nothing but the best for it, but we've got to look at how to embrace this for the sake of our students, and the sake of our long-term future, and to check ourselves if we have too much of a guild mentality. We need to try to figure that out in healthcare as well, to actually realize the promise of this and not have it just affect people in a negative way that we're aspiring artists or aspiring lawyers. Hopefully not too terribly negative.
Thank you. What I want to say is that AI, chatbot, all of these things are not going to define our workplace, right? Or our workforce. It's actually going to refine our workforce. We'd have to understand that. That's one concept. The next concept is that human needs and human wants are insatiable. If you are thinking that you're going to go out of business, understand that human needs and human wants are insatiable. The third concept is that chatbots, AI, machine language, and all of the languages are being commercialized. The big firms are picking it up. Microsoft had Microsoft Transformers, right? Now has added OpenAI's chatbot. Why? Because they are going to commercialize it, because we're going to make money out of it. How do you make money out of it? Set up products that get closer to the workforce than away from the workforce. So the positive thing that I do have over here is that it's going to empower you. Chatbots are going to empower you. Now you don't actually have to wait till 8 a.m. when you are up at 2 a.m. With ideas. You don't have to wait for your peer at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. to ask questions, to resolve your answers. to get a report out by 7 a.m. to a client somewhere in Asia. Now you can do that in real time by asking relevant questions and having some kind of conceptual knowledge to build on a relevant answer. So the positive thing that I do have over here is that it's actually going to empower your workforce, our workforce. There are tools that are going to empower our workforce. Now we can actually dream about products, about solutions, and then we are confident that at a point, to some extent, we do have solutions and we will have solutions for that. And so that is what I do have about the AI and the chatbot, and the fact that now you have a friend who is always with you 24/7 and who is always going to give you solutions for that. Your responsibility is actually to refine yourself, to redesign yourself, to rethink about your process and your products and the people that you're actually going to work with. If you're an employer, your responsibility is to find out if you're going to pick out someone who is technical or someone who is much more skilled, experienced, and actually is able to connect the dots between the technicality and then the human resource. Because now you have the chatbot, the machines, the technology to make up for the technicality of it, right? You do have now service environment, service requests, and service knowledge that anyone can actually pick on that knowledge and have a chatbot to give it relevant training, onboarding training, 24/7, eternal cyclical onboarding training up until their skill goes off the roof. So these are things that actually would help you. And the positive thing is that it's here to empower you. AI is going to set itself not as a replacement, but as a tool that we can actually use to actually build our workforce. So that is a positive thing that I pick from that. And that is the positive thing that I see from Microsoft coming out into the marketplace, that there's so many relevant products out there that Microsoft is going to actually build your workforce with.
Excellent. Well, I want to start, since we didn't get a whole lot of questions from the room for the last panel. Is there anybody in the room that would like to kick us off with a question here on this panel? Go ahead. I'll just repeat it if you want to just say it. Mm-hmm. So let me repeat that really quickly for those that are online. So the question was, we've just talked in this panel about AI being potentially a replacement for the workforce, but we've also talked a lot earlier about it being a co-pilot. That was the name of a specific Microsoft product that one of our previous panelists, I think at the first panel in the moment, mentioned. We also have discussed kind of this co-pilot or this assistive approach. And I think if I'm remembering correctly, and correct me if I got this wrong, the question was, what ways do you see it, to our panel now, what ways do you see it assisting in different things? Is that a good summary? All right.
So I'll give myself as an example. In February, this last month, or early February, Microsoft actually launched the Flash++, right? That is embedded in online Excel. That is very intuitive. I'm actually writing a research on not artificial intelligence. I've coined it to be artificial intuitive intelligence, right? Now, what is happening is that most of our softwares and our tools that we are using is actually predicting what we are actually looking for. So if you have a chatbot system, I do have that system and I use it to build applications a lot. I started my application build with little knowledge about coding. I actually have the front end UI design environment, but then once I started empowering myself, I was able to use ChatGPT and other environments to write simple logics, simple codes that can be embedded in Microsoft Power Automate to actually change numbers, to actually change dates. So now I do not actually have to go into 12,000 files to change strings of dates from one string to the other. I can actually write a code to change that, place it in Power Automate, and now upload it into any software application that I do need. I can do this in real time. Why? Because I asked GPT, I asked a chatbot, and the chatbot just gave me one line of code. I placed it in a string or in a compose, and then it actually did that in real time. So these are the efficiencies that we do have. I also have a friend who is into real estate, right? He usually has a file, this folder, he goes from house to house. He delivers things out there. Now he's able to build applications. This is a school dropout. Has no knowledge in IT, but is able to build front-end interface. Now he's able to send text messages with links to his application, and he's ever building the application and customizing it to individual customers. So there are endless opportunities for you and I, and then you have to ask questions. My dad always told me, if you don't ask questions, you don't get answers. And that's the same thing with the ChatGPT. Ask any question, from the color of your hair, the nicest nails in town, and then you'd always have something that will not only build you physically or skillfully for your workplace, but also build you emotionally and mentally for your workplace. So that's what I think would leverage ourselves as a tools for productivity.
Let me, I'm not sure if this addresses your question directly, but I think there's a perspective here that a lot of people are missing, in that these large language models, ChatGPT, GPT-3, GPT-4, the reason why we're suddenly really excited about just this little aspect of AI isn't because suddenly we figured out a way that now they're smart. What we've got is a new interface. We've got a way to interface with our tech, with a computer, using natural language in a way where it can disambiguate natural language in a functional way. You don't have, I mean, it's like, for those of you old enough to remember the switch from DOS to Windows, and when you and what a mouse and a graphical interface did to the human intuition versus having to learn a bunch of steps. Remember F12 for that, and blah blah blah, and everything is ASCII. And now you needed to know all that, and you'd get people who were good at it because we're humans, we're ridiculously versatile. We got cerebellums. If we keep trying to do stuff, you get people just wicked fast at stuff. But you can get humans are really good at becoming really good at things, but it takes us a tremendous amount of time. It doesn't scale. It's not something that people can just jump into. When we went from basically DOS in a text-based, command-based thing, where you were a huge part of that structure, your memory of how this thing works, the rule structure, or you're looking it up, how do you do this again? You were a huge part of that. It slowed everything down, and it put barriers to entry to utilizing the productivity of that tech. When we went to a graphic interface, when we went to Windows and all that implies, and we're still in that environment, we went to a level of intuition, and we turned it into a spatial navigation event. We still had rules, we still had other stuff, but you could interface it easier with less cognitive effort and with less training because it's built more towards you. And that opened it up. That made it accessible and scalable. Now we have something you can talk to. It's not anything else about it in terms of, oh my God, it reasonably understands what you're saying in a way that you can then use it as essentially a new form of UX. That sounds like maybe that's a smaller thing. That's absolutely revolutionary in terms of our relationship to computers. So that's what's amazing. But because that's all it is right now, it's not going to just replace somebody's job. It might replace if you've got 10 people. And you've got a few people get good at these productivity tools, you don't need 10 anymore, and you have to change around how you do your workflow. But it can't just take over stuff. But it is now a new way, a new intuitive way to not just, I want to make a PowerPoint. You should see the Microsoft recent YouTube videos that have come out talking about Copilot. And they give you a flavor for this if you're used to the office environment of how it can kind of know you and quickly make a PowerPoint and that sort of thing. You'd have to tweak it. It gives you a good flavor for it. But anyone can come in and make a Python code or make a JavaScript thing and make an extension for their Chrome browser now. And they barely have to know how to do that. And so the accessibility, scalability of the interface has made a stepwise improvement, if that makes sense.
So I work with a whole bunch of companies for all sorts of things, and I help to develop organizations out of an entrepreneurial aspect to go into bigger aspects. So let me give you a few really, really tangible ones. A photography company out of Mankato, Minnesota, has been able to triple their throughput of their imaging They go out and they do weddings and graduation photos and all this kind of stuff. And their touch-up time plummeted, right? So they were able to triple their throughput with the same number of people. Medical organization who has it's clinical dictation. So they take clinical dictation from a physician to be able to do billing codes, gets into technical healthcare stuff, but they were able to augment about 25% through the AI engine to be able to expedite process, and accuracy went up, which meant when the doctor said this medication at this dosage, it was a better outcome for the patient. Right. Those kind of things. Paralegals, there's a patent office in the Twin Cities that works through all of this data that they have to bring in. And they had hundreds and hundreds of paralegals having to go through this stuff. And they're able to do it almost 4 times faster now with an AI engine. These kind of things. The really interesting part is when you start getting deeper into this, I almost never talk to anybody who lost their job because of it. What they're doing is they're saying, even that paralegal office, it's a big legal office, they go, cool, we need somebody else to do this other work, right, that we haven't been able to get to. Or it's, hey, we can now put these paralegals out on the grounds and they can actually charge better rates because they're doing higher quality work. Same thing over and over again, but there's very tangible, touchable roles. And none of this is comprehensively replacing the individual. It's always augmenting. It's making their work faster. It's making it more accurate. It's raising the quality of the work. And for that person, they're then being enabled to go take on new tasks almost every time. And this is especially in the workforce environment that we're in right now, even though it is a really weird economy, you're still at a point where you're seeing some companies lay off because of their major economic conditions, but you've got all these other folks still getting everybody they can get their hands on. And AI is just helping to augment that. And it's helping to make a higher quality output for a lot of jobs that people had a lot of troubles with previously.
Excellent. Well, we have a question from online, so let's jump over to that next. Our online question is: relevance for economic activity seems to be the prime rationale for these technologies. Economic activity is only an indirect supporter of human development and is often to its detriment. The question is, how can AI be used for work that helps human development in the core sense of human? And what is this core in your opinion? So we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but maybe we can address it more directly for the individual that submitted this online.
So economic development enables the tool set to be able to become a commodity. If there's no marketplace for a product, the product does not develop, right? So this is one of those things, right? Everything gets better because you have a marketplace for it. Look at medications. There would be no medications if there wasn't a marketplace that drove that research and development dollar and drove that continued evolution of that market space. When you look at how can AI just quote unquote make everybody better kind of stuff, we use AI all day, every day, all over the place for weather management, to determine where we're seeing tornadoes, where we're seeing hurricanes, where we're seeing climate change impacts, where we're seeing soil erosion, where we're seeing this for agriculture to be able to have better crops so that people can be fed, right? Sooner or later, you have to feed people, you have to be able to live in the environment we're in. We use AI all over the world right now to do this. So the European Atmospheric Administration has AI engines right now that they run continuous constant models on to determine what the impact of the weather will be on the upcoming crop cycles. And those crop cycles then can be adjusted based on that AI input, and this is also happening with aspects of diversity issues and disadvantaged people's issues all across the world, where you've got an AI engine that's taking data sets. And again, this goes back to kind of our previous topic of, are the data sets really comprehensive enough to give you the right outcomes? But the capability of the technology is to open people's eyes to problems, right? One of the things that you'll find, especially in a ChatGPT world, is you'll find really quickly that if you use the product, we suck at asking questions, right? We're just really bad at asking the right question. And I was surprised, right? Because I'm a guy who I come from a curiosity growth mindset background. I've been trained in this my whole life, hammered away at me. I thought I was halfway decent at this. And then I started asking, I'm like, why does it give me that answer? I'm asking the wrong question. How do I get to the root cause question? And this is something that is really opening people's eyes as well. When you get into projects and issues, we love to create policy that impacts a problem, but we don't really have any good aspect of getting policy that solves a problem, right? And AI is driving people towards this aspect of root cause. That is a huge impactor, for the future. And this is where I'm an advocate of legislatures using artificial intelligence to determine root causes, because we're really good at going, oh, this happened, thus we must regulate it. But we go, but why did it happen? And why did that happen? And why? And getting to the actual root cause of an issue so that we can solve something for once. AI can really point those things out. So those are just some examples right off the top of my head about how commercialization or not commercialization, these are major impactors for the world, doing good things for good people all over the place.
So I'm in violent agreement with that, but I'm going to talk about something else. What I mean is, if you're listening to this, if you're participating in this discourse, you're going to be fine. In fact, you're going to be more than fine. I mean, there was only a few days' notice for this whole day event, and if you see the priority of this and you're making it part of, your enrichment, you're potentially going to do fantastic in the new whatever it's going to be. But imagine an avatar that is the most attractive thing you've ever seen, or the most inspiring thing you've ever seen, or becomes in your whatever situation, whatever it is that you most want to interact with, in the voice that you find the most engaging, that knows you, knows your heart and soul, has been around with you for years, and will take you wherever you want to go in the interwebs and in deep conversation. Now, what if that's free? What do we know now about tech if the service or product is free? If the product is free, what does that really mean? Somebody yell it. You're the product. So pay the $8 if you can find it. Pay the $10, whatever it is. Don't get the ad model of the free AI friend that you don't own, that can be turned off. If this tech, which I'm super excited about in spite of what might be coming out of my mouth, for the people that are engaged in this space, it's an absolute ridiculous opportunity. It's a gold rush in a gold mine, multiple gold mines. But this tech also has the potential to have levels of engagement, levels of shallow, go nowhere engagement that will make TikTok look boring. And I'm guessing most of you don't spend 2 hours a day on TikTok because you're here. But TikTok is a dopamine prison. And AI has the potential to basically be a kind of opioid for people who want that, or people that are to get to the heart of the question. I'm a crazy capitalist, and this will be monetized in many ways, and this will be put to work by various things. We are people, we're apes, okay? We're wonderful and altruistic to our in-groups, and we're sons of bitches to our out-groups. And we define those in-groups and out-groups around many things, and they are not just physical or aesthetic, they're also ideological, and we will weaponize this tech. There'll be lots of things that we will do with this, because that's who we are and that's what we do. And now we have something that can scale us and force multiply us. And we're gonna have to deal with all of that. The monetization standpoint, there's gonna be a lot of good that'll come from that, but do please try to proselytize to people to avoid whatever free models come along.
Thank you. I'll make mine shorter. I'll just say, if you are out there worried about the detriment of AI on your workforce or on the economies of any humans, you are wrong. I'm sorry to say you are wrong, because there are so many unknowns out there that can help build us. Just imagine in 2020, if we didn't have the technologies, COVID struck, you'd have walked home with nothing. But then what did you do? You walked home with a desktop and some small mini PC, and then you continue to work. So just imagine all of those things, and imagine how, I remember those times, Microsoft Azure requests, just the cloud solutions and cloud systems just shut up, and everyone wanted it. So if you think that AI or technologies of this sort are going to be detrimental to you, then you are the product. You've seen yourself as a product for too long in the company that you are in. You've been in there for 20 years, 30 years, and you still see yourself as the product. Once you move yourself out of being a product to being the person who would use the product to enhance a process, then you would start seeing the relevance of AI and all of the solutions that are there to help you actually build yourself and then stand out as a non-detrimental victim to this ever-evolving beauty.
100%, sorry, 100% agree. Just as long as your mindset is you're the agent in your own life, and this is a tool that you're going to use to pursue your goals, it's going to be fantastic. If you look at it as what's this going to do for me, then you're not the agent.
All right. Well, do we have any questions from the audience before we charge on anybody in the room that wants to ask a question? Yeah.
Oh, I think there's a lot of business. Yeah, I agree with that. I think economists kind of call this skill bias. So it's how we can skill work, some skill workers increase their wage, increase their, their good job. And I think you mentioned also because you are the person who use those products. But I'm sure like there are some persons, some job out there in those products. Now the question then is like automation or maybe globalization. How could we retrain those? And most of those people that got that job, they can be either 40, 50, they don't want to go back to college. Unlike this fresh college graduate, they can obtain new skill and use those new technology AI to enhance their productivity and increase their wage. What about those people that are left?
All right, well, let me repeat that for the folks online. So the question was that basically when technologies like this, and by implication, possibly this technology has enhanced the wages and other benefits to people that were already doing pretty well and displaces people that are at the lower end of the economic pyramid. And so the question was, what can we do for those people specifically in terms of retraining them? And what form would that take, particularly for people that may be mid-career or towards the end of their career, where they're not necessarily super keen to go back and take another whole college degree or a lot like that. Did I catch all the stuff? Okay, excellent. Who wants to start?
Thank you. So AI can never replace emotional intelligence, can never replace creativity. I'm going to go back to where I started. I said, unfortunately, people are going to lose their jobs once we really understand the enormity of that. But fortunately, people are not going to lose their jobs. So in redefining yourself and then your productivity and your profitability to any entity that you present yourself to, you have to understand that your human component can be enhanced even in the face of all of these technological enhancements, right? So if you work at a customer service center, and then all of a sudden you realize that now there's a bot system, now everything is moving to the chatbot. How do you enhance yourself? How do you change? How do you pick up all of those 20, 30 years of experience and then try to humanize that? What are the solutions that are going to come out of that? There are no specific solutions for someone who has been in a non-technological, very advanced in their knowledge, in their experience and age for that. But then the big thing is that you have to look within, find out what human aspect of yourself can never be taken out of that. We've seen people step out of a job market after 30 years or 40 years in there and then have started doing products, making products, simple products, and shipping it out through Amazon and etc. Their only problem about shipping these things out is that they don't have websites to sell them out. right? You've had so many ideas. We have people who have YouTubes, we have, talking about anything about life. We have kids that are making millions of dollars now just jumping around with toys. How did they do that? Because their parents enhanced their technology to sell their human self out there to the world for the world to see. So every time you feel very threatened by this whole thing, understand that you have a human component that can never be taken away from you, and you have to leverage that for your next opportunity, or for upgrading the opportunities that are available to you.
And so just to repeat that for the folks online, the follow-up question was, are you saying that every individual needs to be their own entrepreneur?
As a matter of fact, every individual is their own entrepreneur. Whatever job you find yourself in, you are your own entrepreneur. You wake up every day, you are your own entrepreneur. You are selling a skill. You are selling a relevance to whatever company that you are in, regardless of if you are doing it as a group or you are bearing the cost as a sole proprietor. You are your own entrepreneur. That is the kind of mindset that this is going to challenge all of us, right? If you understand yourself as that, you can easily walk out of a place of no relevance to a place of much relevance without having fear of actually losing your job.
So I'm going to try to say something really positive, because I mean this. The productivity enhancement has been the first thing to come around that is potentially a structural fix for our demographic structural problem. You know, we have an economy that has been able to sustain itself very well and grow very well, partially because the generation before us was bigger than our generation. Changes your whole risk profile. You know, it changed how you look at capital. It changed how you want to take a big loan out. Well, things will always, get better, generally speaking. And if they're bad, it's only bad short term. We've never had a system, and now it's going to be a global system, at least within the developed world, that is having to deal with every generation being a little bit smaller than the generation before that, and everybody's decisions are future based. And if the future is going to be a smaller market than today on the aggregate or in the specific, that can be paralytic to change. That can be paralytic to risk taking. It's really difficult to staff a factory right now. Really, really difficult. In Fargo or almost anywhere in the country. It is really difficult to find a nurse. It's getting really difficult to find teachers. So the real workforce shortages and the dramatic inflationary effects that's having, and the stifling of growth, that's a major problem. And it looks like without something like AI, it will only get worse and worse, and it'll cause all sorts of consternations. We're gonna have to revivify what is our economic system and everything that entails. This actually has a real potential, especially when it becomes embodied, when things like a Tesla robot or Figures robots or Boston Dynamics combines with, and you get a multimodal approach, and you can actually have a relatively easy trainable general purpose worker, if you will, that you can have do assembly or other things. And you can have it make your burrito. I mean, have you seen the staffing issues at fast casual places? So this is way more potential upside without getting into creating a god and Shoggoth and all that other stuff. Way more upside to workforce issues than downside.
So I love your question. It's the same question I hear almost every time I'm on stage now talking about AI. What about those who are left behind? And I would say, let's go to the year 1900. 1900, New York City had literally 1,200 people whose whole job it was to shovel horse manure, because there was so much horse manure in downtown New York City that it would actually start fires. It would compress and it would spontaneously combust. So they had to remove it. So they had 1,200 people whose whole job was to take a shovel, take the horse manure, put into a bucket, haul it out of town, and dump it out into these fields where they would spread it around, etc. The advent of the car destroyed that row of jobs, right? That entire career. And that wasn't just New York City. It's just one that I've looked up and read about, and it's the craziest story. You got to read it. But all of those people went, wow, we don't have any jobs anymore because cars completely replaced us. And trolleys became part of that, and other modes of transportation became part of that. And that's one job of many, many jobs in the early 1900s. Buggy whip manufacturers, right? The only guys using buggy whips anymore, I think, are the Amish. Love the Amish, but I think the only ones still doing it, right? Those kind of jobs completely disappeared. Brand new positions took their place. When you go into the research on these folks from New York, a huge portion of them became mechanics. Some of them became taxi drivers, right? They became trolley engineers. They became the people who helped redesign the roads, right? They had to give up a career and start a new career because their industry went away. This actually happens all the time. This has happened throughout history, especially in the last 150 years, because the industrialization has created and smashed industries at a rate that's just unbelievable in comparison to the 10,000 years before that. So in these last 150 years, you can go and you can see industry after industry that became very, very important to society, this very, very broad industry, and was completely disrupted and completely displaced by a different industry. We, as an education system, had to adapt. As a workforce program system, as part of the states and the federal government, had to adapt. The individuals, I love that you're your own entrepreneur, right? They had to decide, well, am I going to stand on the breadline? Because in the 1900s, there were nowhere near the social safety net that we have today. Nothing even close in that time, right? In fact, they were at vastly, vastly higher risk then than people are today. And they had to make the decision, am I going to stand on the breadline, or am I going to do something for my family where I can learn a new skill? That decision may have to happen again, but in a lot of aspects, people are going to be able to say, well, I have this skill. It naturally moves over into this other skill. This is one of the things that's just crazy right now is what are the 10 most popular or fastest growing jobs today here on March, whatever day it is, 23rd, right, of 2023. And what did we predict those jobs would be 10 years ago? And then you back up another 10 years and another 10 years. And over the last, since roughly the 1990s, we've been wrong comprehensively across those lists. And it's not because we picked the wrong jobs. It's because 7 out of the 10 jobs didn't exist 10 years ago. And this is something that's just constantly going on right now, right? In 2007, how many iPhone app developers were there? 0, right? There's no iPhone yet, right? A year later, everybody's like, what's this iPhone thing, right? And they figure out this aspect. This is what we're going to have to see, right? What we need to encourage across all these groups, right? Because I'm one of these older folks who maybe doesn't want to always change and learn new things, but really love change and embrace it maybe more than others. But what we have to continue to hammer into our education system is less about putting people in a job and more about staying curious and enabling and empower curiosity, enabling and empowering growth mindset. And I tell my kids, right? So my kids are 19. She's actually here at this college. She's going into biochemistry, genetics, smart kid, loves her STEM fields, right? And she's here in this college doing this. And I've told her, learn everything you can, but don't expect that job to still exist 5 years from now, because it may not, right? My other son is at a strange university that's north of here that I don't know if I'm allowed to mention or not, but he's in the aerospace programs, right? And he's big into flight and space agriculture. And that career doesn't even exist yet. He's studying for a job that doesn't exist yet, right? That's part of what we're going to have to change our education system towards is less about learn this tangible, touchable, reading, writing, arithmetic stuff and do that. But you must be curious. You must be a growth mindset. You must be willing to continue to grow through your life. That's what we're going to have to continue to evolve to, because the reality is whatever job any of us have right now may not be here 5 years from now, because it may completely change. And that's just part of what we're going to get used to. And I still am very, very positive about all of this, even though I'm one of the people who's going to be, towards the end of my career, thinking about this stuff, having to do these changes. Because again, what I've seen, take the artistry aspect. I used to play with Adobe Photoshop back in the 90s. I thought it was a ton of fun. It would take me a week and a half to be able to make a picture that now I can literally do with 4 clicks on my tablet. And I'm like, this is awesome. I don't want to spend a week and a half doing this. I want to do the 4 clicks thing. That's the kind of stuff that we will continue to see. But we've got to push growth mindset. We've got to push curiosity, and that will help us to make this transition as a people.
All right, thanks, Sean. So we're getting close to the end of time. So I want to do kind of a few rapid fire questions. All right. We got 2 more from the online, and then I got 1 to start us off with this. So again, just a really quick thoughts, maybe 45 seconds per. If you can answer it in that time, maybe some of them will take a little bit longer. But we've talked a lot about jobs that might be lost. What do each of you think is the job that's most likely to be gained from ChatGPT and related technologies? What would that be?
Artificial intelligence, cybersecurity. I can't automate, I can't AI what I can't secure. And the bad actor aspect of people who want to then get inside an AI engine and change its data set or change its algorithms it just has immense possibilities to it. And as a cyber guy, I think that's one of the evolving positions that you don't see yet. It's just an AI cyber dedicated.
So twofold, we're going to have an authentication problem. It's going to be ridiculous. Other than, we may reach a point where the only way you really feel that this is a person is by smell. We're at least now where we can be reasonably confident that we're humans up here. But we're shortly where if you get a video call from your boss, you can't be sure. So how do we establish authentication methods and the building up of that tech? And then concomitant to that, if that's the appropriate word, we're going to have to revisit some cybersecurity things. Like maybe we shouldn't have the power grid connected to the internet in the very near future if the supervisor who has decision rights to shut stuff down is fakeable. So figuring out how to re-envision firewalls. And at what point do we have to actually get back to the physical for certain super critical stuff? And don't know what the answers are, but there's going to be a lot of hard engineering in those spaces, a lot of jobs.
Mine is SMEs in retail, small and medium scale enterprises in retail. They are going to go up. People are going to sell more. People are going to reach out, get opportunities to reach out to much more and a larger customer base and sell more products, fail in some, win and succeed in more, and be able to have a turnaround, change of product and perception and concept of what they are selling within in real time. So that's what I think. I think SMEs in retail are it's going to be the best and the biggest winners of this whole thing.
All right, excellent. So let's go to one again, rapid fire here. Question from online. When it comes to the medical profession, what level should we feel comfortable with AI making diagnosis and medical plans?
So far as your doctor is involved.
Not from large language models per se, they would be the interface, but for things like Watson, I think in some cases it's better. And we just have to figure out how to get past the trust elements of it and the regulatory issues.
I actually worked on one of these projects, given my former employer. So typically the AI is actually more accurate than the doctor is. However, you do not trust it. You use it as a guide. So it is an aspect of helping the physician come to a diagnosis set, and the diagnosis then can be confirmed at the physician level. Maybe someday it can go past that, but today, wonderful, wonderful tool to help.
All right, and our last rapid fire here. So the question is, how can NDSU adjust to the impact of AI to better prepare students to join the workforce and provide value to employers? The person asking the question says, as of today, it seems like there are opportunities NDSU isn't capitalizing on.
If you're with any organization that is capitalizing on all the advantages, please tell me who they are, because I want to come work for them. But right now, everybody's got the opportunities. Let's make an AI professor. let's get some students together to build an AI professor and learn from it and build one. I think that would be amazingly cool. You're going to learn up and down and left and right through an entire process, vertically and horizontally. I think that would be a ton of fun.
Aggressively pursue and experiment with adaptive learning. So if somebody comes to the table and they already know half the material, how can they prove that to you? And don't make them sit through the instruction for that, but yet give them the credential. And there's revenue issues associated with that. There's engineering issues associated with that, but that is the future and we need to get moving.
Reconceptualizing all theoretical learning modules into much more vocational and technical hands-on, bring the students back into the classroom, whether virtual or not, give them more workshops, let them do hands-on work, let them come out with their own creativities in all that they do.
One super fast add-on: computer science, cyber science, education, every student, every degree, everywhere, period. All of them. And I don't mean a degree, but at least a class. I want every single graduate in every program to have computer science and cyber science knowledge, because I don't care what field they're going into, they need it.
Well, thank you to members of our panelists. Thanks for those that are joining us online, and thanks to those that are here in the room. Let's give our panelists a round of applause, please.